What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Moto G 5G. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and for the latest pricing, be sure to check out the link in the video description. But with that being said, let's get started. So with the Moto G 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 81.4% screen to body ratio. So for what it is, the display is pretty decent. I would have liked to see 1080p instead of 720p, but at least we do have a 90Hz refresh rate, and this is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. So when you're doing stuff like streaming videos, for example, you're going to get a better experience overall. And when you're just navigating through the phone in general, it's going to feel a little bit more premium. In addition to this, back to the resolution, even though we only have a 720p display, I do think for just being 720p, it looks pretty decent, and the colors look pretty nice as well. So overall, if you're doing a decent amount of content consumption, then I would say the Moto G 5G, while maybe not being the best option out there, is still going to be pretty decent. Another nice thing about this display is the size at 6.5 inches. It may not be the biggest display out there, especially compared to something like the Moto G Stylus, but at the same time, it's not small by any means. So you're still going to get the benefits of having a larger display, and at the same time, it's not going to be too large, so it'll still be comfortable to hold in your hand and carry in your pocket. So again, overall, while the display isn't maybe my top choice, I still do think for most people it's going to be perfectly fine. Now for storage, this phone is getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that's definitely a real nice amount of storage. For a mid-range phone like this, you're really not going to be getting any more, because really the only other phones out there with more than 256GB of internal storage are flagship phones, and those of course are much more expensive than this. And keep in mind, there's also microSD card expansion, so if you're really a power user, if you have a bunch of different apps, photos and videos, stuff like that, you can always offload some of that stuff onto a microSD card to save a little space. Now there's no wireless charging with this phone, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Definitely a nice spot for it. Pretty much every Motorola phone that's come out in 2022 so far does have a fingerprint scanner in the same exact location, but this is definitely not a bad thing because it's real convenient. You're probably going to be touching this button to wake up the display anyway, so you might as well have it unlock at the same time. And in addition to the fingerprint scanner, there's also face unlock with this phone, so we're getting two options to get into it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and give this fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive here, no issues whatsoever. Now taking a look at the camera setup, with the Motorola Moto G 5G, we got a hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as features go, this phone isn't really bad, but at the same time it is a little disappointing that we don't get an ultra-wide camera here, because although not every phone in this price range has an ultra-wide camera, I want to say a fair amount of the competitors do. So with this phone, not having an ultra-wide camera does put it at a little bit of a disadvantage. But that being said, with a 50 megapixel main camera, if you're just taking regular photos, you're still going to get some real good pictures here. So if you're taking pictures for something like social media, for example, this phone is still going to be a great choice. Now to give you an idea of what this camera can do, here are some photos taken with the main camera. As you can see, these are some pretty nice looking photos, definitely lives up to being a 50 megapixel camera. Sure, they're not going to be anywhere near the quality of a $1,000 flagship phone, but again, for most people, this camera is going to be perfectly fine. If you're taking pictures for something like social media, or maybe vacation photos, something like that, then this phone will get the job done just fine. Now here's a couple photos taken with the macro camera, and I would say they did turn out pretty well. Maybe not the best macro camera in the world, but again, for what it is pretty good. Now here's a photo taken with the front-facing camera using portrait mode. As you can see, it is a little overexposed. Now this probably has to do mostly with the lighting, but I will say I have used plenty of other phones in the same exact lighting and angle, and they turned out a little bit better. So this front-facing camera, while still being, I guess, decent, may not be the best if you're constantly using it. Now on the other hand, here's a portrait photo taken using the rear camera, and it turned out really good. I really like how the details look in here. The background is blurred really nicely without looking too obnoxious, and everything does look decently professional. So if you do like to get those portrait photos with a rear camera, then this phone is going to be great for that. Now for video, with the Motorola Moto G 5G, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K unfortunately, but at the same time, it's not really that much of a surprise. The only phone in this exact price range I can think of off the top of my head that can record 4K videos is the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G. So while there are plenty of phones a little bit more expensive than this that can record 4K videos no problem, in this specific price range, it's not quite as common. But that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at a video sample taken with this phone. So we're doing a test video with the Motorola Moto G 5G. Definitely keep in mind what the audio sounds like. And testing the autofocus right now. So as you can see there, the video quality was decent, but if you're recording videos for anything serious like YouTube for example, I would probably go for a higher end device that can record better videos, because while I do think this phone's videos are okay for something like social media, or maybe Snapchat or something in general where the quality just doesn't matter a whole lot, I'm not super impressed with it when it comes to something more professional, especially when it comes to the audio. So in general, if you're recording more casual videos, then this phone will do perfectly fine. But if you're making videos that you actually want to keep, again, I would definitely consider a different device. But in general, as far as the camera setup goes, again, it is too bad that there's no ultra-wide camera. But other than that, I do think this phone is pretty good. So if you are taking lots of photos, but they're more basic types of photos and you don't need a bunch of different features, then the Moto G 5G will definitely get the job done. Now internally with this phone, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. Now I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1684. Now by itself, without anything to compare it to, a Geekbench 5 benchmark test score might not mean a whole lot to you. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your score to this to see whether or not this phone would actually be an upgrade for you, because depending on what you currently have, your phone might actually be faster than this. But that being said, I will tell you from experience, having run this test on so many different phones, this is a pretty decently fast score, and for a 5G phone in this price range, it's just about average. As far as what you're going to be doing with this phone, you're not going to be doing any super high-end activities like playing really demanding games like Fortnite and Call of Duty, or editing videos or anything like that. But if you're just doing more normal activities like browsing the web, going on social media, streaming content like videos and music, and a little bit of more basic mobile gaming, then this phone will get the job done perfectly fine. And honestly, based on the name, this kind of goes without saying, but remember, this is a 5G phone, so you are going to get 5G connectivity, which of course means access to the latest and greatest technology. And today in 2022, I do think getting a 5G phone is a great idea, because while 4G is not going away anytime soon, the 5G network is always growing and getting better and better. And with all these great 5G phones coming out, I do think it's a really good time to get one. But overall, when it comes to processing power, sure, this phone is going to be nowhere near a higher end flagship phone, but at the same time, if you're looking for something that's decently fast and is going to be able to handle all your daily activities with no issues, then the Moto G 5G is going to be a great choice for that. Now this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging. So as far as the battery size goes, this is pretty much the largest battery you can get, at least in the US. So you're going to get tons of battery life throughout the day. Depending on how you use your phone, it could be multiple days for that matter. And in addition to this, because the battery is so large and you're starting out with so much more battery life than you need just to get through the day, down the road as the battery degrades, which all batteries do, as the capacity starts to shrink, you're not going to notice nearly as quickly as you would with, say, an iPhone SE for example. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer period of time without having to replace it, then a phone like this with such a large battery is definitely going to be a great option. In addition to this, the 10W fast charging doesn't hurt either. Now, compared to other phones on the market in the same price range, 10W fast charging isn't really that impressive, but it's still better than nothing, and I will say this phone, despite not having the most impressive stats when it comes to fast charging, does still charge up pretty fast. Now, unfortunately, this phone does not have NFC, so if you like to make mobile contactless payments, unfortunately, you won't be able to with this phone. But if you do want a Motorola phone that's similar to this that does have NFC, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 actually does have NFC, and that phone happens to be the first US Moto G phone I've ever seen that actually has that feature. So if you do want to learn more about that, definitely check out my videos about that phone on the channel because I do have quite a few. But as far as the regular Moto G 5G goes, unfortunately, again, there is no NFC with this phone. So if you do like to use tap and pay features, unfortunately, you're going to have to go with a different device. But now that we've gone over some of the specs and features of the phone, let's take a closer look at the device itself. So on the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side, we got the power key, and remember, this is also the fingerprint scanner, volume down, volume up. On the top of the phone, we got the noise cancelling microphone. And on the back, we got our camera setup and our flash. The back has a matte finish that doesn't really pick up fingerprints too badly. You can see them in certain lighting, but in general, I do think it looks pretty decent. Now, as far as the materials go, things do feel decently sturdy, and the build quality overall is pretty good. But that being said, don't expect this phone to feel very premium, because after all, it is made entirely of plastic, except of course the display, which is glass. But other than that, again, it is all plastic, and this plastic doesn't even feel very high quality either. So in general, while the phone doesn't look or feel cheap, you can really tell just by holding it that it is very much a mid-range phone. But as far as the actual design goes, I do think it looks pretty nice. It has a nice sleek modern look, and I especially like the hole punch front facing camera. It adds a nice modern touch and makes the phone look a little bit more minimalistic. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Motorola Moto G 5G. I would say for what it is, this phone is pretty decent. Sure, it doesn't have a 1080p display, but everything else about the display is pretty good. It has a good refresh rate, good size. It all looks pretty decent, so if you're consuming a lot of content, you're really not going to go wrong with it. In addition to this, the phone also has a great amount of storage, so no matter what you're doing with your phone, whether you're more of a casual user or a power user, whatever the case may be, for a mid-range phone, you really can't get better than this. It also has a decent camera, although unfortunately, again, there is no ultra-wide camera, which was pretty disappointing, and the video quality could be better, but in general, if you're taking more normal pictures and you're not recording a ton of videos, then this phone will still get the job done. The processor is also pretty good, and again, we do get 5G connectivity here. So in general, by itself, this actually is a pretty decent phone. Now, when we actually take a look at what kind of value this phone really provides for the money, that's where things kind of start to get iffy, because there are plenty of phones out there that are pretty much the same price, some of which have much better specs and features. But again, just considering this phone and what it really gives us, I do think while maybe not being the best option out there, it is still a solid device that you're probably not going to go wrong with. Now, for the latest up-to-date pricing, be sure to check out the link in the video description, because this is always changing. And if you want to learn more about this phone, stay tuned, because I will be making plenty of videos about it in the near future. But this concludes my review of the Motorola Moto G 5G. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.